Cloudy with temperatures in the low to middle 40s for the city, 30s in the suburbs. Tomorrow we fall back and temperatures are also returning to the low 60s. That's all under mostly to partly sunny skies.
There's a party in your pocket.
The free iHeart Radio app. Live radio, playlists for everything, and the most podcasts on the planet.
And with one tapping, all become presets.
Make sure the free iHeart Radio app is on your smartphone now.
The #1 app for radio.
iHeartRadio. Tune in for Breakfast Before the Birds with Natalie Eganoff, Sundays at 10 on Fox Sports The Gambler on iHeartRadio. Presented by Godshall's Beef Bacon, bold, smoky, and game day ready with 0 carbs and full crunch. Get recipe ideas at godshalls.com.
#1 on your car radio preset and the new and improved iHeartRadio app. WDAS and WD273D Philadelphia is Fox Sports Radio, The Gambler. Kicking off your Saturday the right way. You're listening to Sean Barnard live right here on The Gambler.
What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome into Sean Barnard Live this fine Saturday morning, a spooky Saturday morning as the dust settles from Halloween and the Philadelphia 76ers picking up their first loss of the season. That's primarily what we're going to jump in today, as I want to talk all things Sixers, because finally the Sixers team is worth talking about this season. So appreciate each one of you guys for joining us. Shout out to you guys for tuning in wherever you are, whether that is on the iHeart app specifically, over on PickSwap Media on YouTube. Make sure to tune in there and drop a subscribe. We got plenty of awesome stuff. Pump it out and get ready to get rolling on there. Potentially some big news brewing this week. Some exciting stuff in the works. So make sure you stay posted for that. And of course, those of you tuning in through my Twitter account at Sean_Barnard1. Woke up to the news that I had been not suspended, but my account is under whatever the call is. They're looking through it. I don't really know what I did to deserve that there. So hopefully still reaching the masses and getting out there as expected. But nonetheless, like I said, I do want to jump in here and talk some Sixers today. Just going to do an hour show for this. I got some other work commitments I got to jump into immediately after, and appreciate each and every one of you guys for hanging with me. Shout out to Mike Sports Vibes in the comments here. And again, do want to talk some Philadelphia 76ers. So typically with this, with my esteemed co-host, Sam Ostry, we do a little stock up, stock down for the course of the NBA. I want to dive specifically into the Sixers team with a little stock up and stock down individually for each player on this roster. But first, I'm going to start a little bit and just reflecting on last night. The Sixers picking up their first loss of the season, 109-108. The Boston Celtics end up picking up the victory there. The Sixers, not one, but 2 chances to win at the end, and ended up coming up short. Wasn't exactly how they drew it up at the finish there. The ultimate final shot being basically 26-foot heave from Joel Embiid, where he may not have even got it off if you really dive into the slow breakdown of that. I didn't love the entire process leading up to that, with Quentin Grimes being the guy to take the ball, being forced to make a decision. I know Nick Nurse spoke after the game that basically options, like their top 3 options of that play, were shut off by the Celtics there. The ball was supposed to hit Tyrese Maxey. Did not happen. The double coming from Jaylen Brown, I think, kind of panicked Quentin Grimes to an extent. And again, I just don't think that is quite the guy I want the ball in the hands or in his hands at that specific spot there. But I'm not here to critique Nick Nurse after this is a 4-1 start to the season, in which I think by every metric that we could possibly have, this team has exceeded expectations to this point. So disappointing, but my takeaway from last night is once again, just the fight, the competitive spirit that this team possesses, and the way that they will not wave the white flag until the very end. Trailing by 24 points and still finding a way to push back, to keep it competitive, to give yourself a chance at the end. That's encouraging enough to me. And this is not a Boston Celtics team that I think should be viewed as a pushover. I know there's no Jason Tatum. I know that they are not the peak of what they are, but they still got Jaylen Brown. Peyton Pritchard can score with the best in the league. Hugo Gonzalez popped off the page to me last night for the effort level and defense that he brought. This is going to be a team in the mix in the Eastern Conference, even if it is not the prime version of the Celtics. But enough about the Celtics. I do want to talk about the Philadelphia 76ers specifically here, and do want to dive into the stock up and stock down across the board. I want to lead right off here with the big fella, Joel Embiid, as that's been a guy who I think stock point was at a low point of his career coming into this season. Now, the Joel conversation is interesting, right? He certainly is not the MVP version of himself, the best version of himself. But what I think is becoming clearer and clearer through these early parts of the season, that he individually has played just 4 games, the team has played 5. Joel Embiid is still very necessary to this Sixers basketball team. And the reason that I say that is I know that the, face of the franchise has sort of changed hands to this point. That Tyrese Maxey is the guy and has looked every part of this. I mean, second in the NBA in scoring to this point. To list out his stats on the season, 35.2 points per game for Tyrese Maxey. That's going down on 46.2% shooting from the field, 46.8% from beyond the three-point arc. Also adding 4.6 rebounds per game, 9.4 assists per game, which is something I do not think he's getting enough shine. Coming off a 14 assist performance last night, which tied his career high in that specific metric there. Maxey's been the real deal and will continue to be the case. But Joel Embiid still must be kept alive as a part of the Sixers vision. And I want to start with the encouraging signs that I've seen. The game one, the opener, was a concern that my panic meter had risen to a level that I didn't think it was going to be at with Joel Embiid. And the reason that I felt that way is I was encouraged by the Joel Embiid that I saw in the preseason. In the lone preseason game against the Minnesota Timberwolves, I saw a little bit of movement out there. Some flashes of Joel looking like Joel, playmaking at a high level, pulling in a couple rebounds, and still getting buckets at a regular rate. Then flash forward to game one of the season, and that was not the Joel Embiid we saw. Shot 1 of 9 from the floor, didn't really impact the game on either side of the ball. And then even just the progress from that game one to what we saw last night, I think is incredibly encouraging. And what he overall finished with last night, played 25 minutes, which is a season high there. He had 20 points, 6 rebounds, had 3 assists there, also had 2 blocks, shot 6 of 13 from the field, got to the free throw line 7 times, which I think is a great sign when we're looking at Joel specifically there. And the movement, it looked better to me. That it, again, it is still not peak Joel and likely never will be. That I think the calculus that has changed is you do have to provide an adequate front court make to Joel Embiid at a level that was not the case before. That this is not going to be a guy probably for the rest of his career that can just clean up boards at the rate that you would hope a center can. But when you pair him with a guy like Dominic Barlow or potentially a Dembona, Jabari Walker making his impact, Paul George and Trendon Watford are going to play their way into that conversation as well, there can still be some pretty exciting results. That Joel Embiid is going to be able to roll out of bed and score 20 points at the NBA level until he's 50. That I understand the knee concerns are there, and he's not going to be this high flyer, this guy dunking and blocking shots, but that jump shot ain't going away anytime soon, and he's going to that at a very regular rate. And again, I mentioned the free throws, him getting the line 7 times. That to me is like a sign of trust in his body, because when he gets to the line like that, he is putting his shoulder down, creating contact. He does it among the best in the entire league and has for several seasons now. And we saw a little bit of that last night from Joel Embiid. That this is not a guy just living and dying with the jumper entirely. Yes, that is essentially the identity of his offense at this stage of the game, but there is some pick and pop action, a little bit of motion, the dribble handoff stuff, that there's things that they are leaning on with Joel that I'm excited about. And even with this young core, which has certainly stole the headlines, and we are going to get into each of these guys, Maxey, VJ Edgecombe, Quentin Grimes, Jared McCain coming back in the short term here. To win an NBA championship, you still need a guy that when it is the pace of play slows, you're in the half court, can get a bucket among the best in the league. And like it or not, Joel Embiid is still the Sixers' best chance at having that guy. That, yes, it's great to see Tyrese Maxey taking the steps that he has. And I feel more confident about him in this conversation. I think we do have to open the conversation up a bit more for this guy might be able to be the best player on a championship team at a level that I've never felt like in Tyrese Maxey's career. I've always viewed him as an incredibly high-level player, an all-star caliber talent. But that short list of players that can actually be the best team on a championship winner is incredibly small. Tyrese Maxey is playing his way into cracking that specific conversation. But with Joel Embiid specifically, we've seen him be that guy. And I understand you can throw the playoff shortcomings in my face, never getting past the second round, no championships to his name. When you look at the grand scheme of his career, it is fair to push back that it has been underwhelming from a playoff setting. But we also have not seen a Sixers team that's been able to survive without Joel Embiid. Through the duration of his career, it has been true that the Sixers win and lose with what level Joel Embiid has played at. That is not the case this year and will not be the case for the remainder of the season. There are going to be nights, and we've seen it already this year, where Joel Embiid doesn't quite have it, and the production is completely dominated by the likes of the VJ Edgecombes, the Tyrese Maxeys, the Quentin Grimes, that these guys can get red hot at a level. And by the way, for all that is thrown into Joel Embiid conversation and critiques of leadership or personality here, he looks like he's absolutely loving it, man. That I think it is a breath of fresh air for Joel directly to not feel the weight of his world on his shoulders on an every night basis, that he can defer. It looks like he's having fun playing basketball again. And I know that seems like such a little thing, but I think that is so important for him, enjoying the season, being bought in. This dude looks like he believes in the vision. And as far as the minutes limit thing, the Sixers have been pretty tight-lipped on what the plan is, not laying out the entirety that we've been told. It's a strict 20-minute limit, and that's been the case for most of the season. He did play a season-high 25 minutes last night. He did finish a game for the first time last night, which I love to see, and I think is another sign of encouragement there. I'm also comforted by the fact that there's an actual plan in place, that this is not just throw Joel Embiid out there and we'll see what happens at the end of the year. It does feel like there is a calculated plan, a concept, an idea for this is the best way to get him through the season and at his healthiest when the moment is at its largest. If that means we only see 20 minutes of Joel Embiid until the second half of the season or until the postseason, you can get me to sign up and be bought in for that. That seems to be what is playing out in front of us. I want to commend the Sixers organization for that. This has been an area that they've fallen extremely short on for the larger part of his career. Is there is a stage or there is a responsibility to protect the player from themselves. And I don't think they've done a good enough job about that with Joel and the larger scheme of the conversation. This year, it does feel like they are, and I love that that is the case. So we'll see what he ultimately scales up to me, what the best version of Joel Embiid could be this season. And I appreciate the comments once again. I absolutely love that there is a plan. Shout out to you, Mike Sports Vibes Balling. Love it that is the concept that is in place here. It's comforting to me that there is this grand scheme, this plan. It is not just rolling out on a night-by-night basis and hoping for the best. We'll see what he ultimately scales up to be and how much physically he can still improve from what we've seen thus far. But I do think the version of Joel that we saw last night is still a guy that can impact winning at a high level. And again, you have to compliment him in ways that you did not have to think about in past years. But that is a problem that you should welcome. That is a guy that still brings something. It's still a net positive for a team. And that's becoming more and more clear to me. Now, to move off Joel Embiid, I do want to transition to the guy whose stock has not hit a low point whatsoever, and that is VJ Edgecombe. Now, to lay out VJ as a whole, he's averaging 40.2 minutes per game this season, which is among the league leaders there, averaging 21.2 points, 5.4 assists, 5.6 rebounds, shooting 43.8% from three, 49.4% from the field. It felt like a quiet VJ Edgecombe game last night, and he still finished with 17 points, 5 assists, 5 rebounds. Did think he impacted winning, and hit some big shots for this team. I mean, that three-pointer that was thrown out to him to Joel, which I believe cut the lead to 2, even in the first half when they were searching for any semblance of offense, VJ Edgecombe, third overall pick VJ Edgecombe, was the guy to carry that responsibility. Hit a couple big mid-range shots that aren't really a part of the book on VJ. That's not really a skill set that we kind of thrown on him as a huge part of it there, but he delivered in it. And I do like it. Shout out to Phil at Trending in the AM. Make sure you check him out as well. That last play for the Sixers was so poorly executed. Yeah, I'm in no disagreement there. I don't love that Quentin Grimes was the guy making a decision in that play. I know Nick Nurse kind of addressed it post-game, basically saying that their top 2 looks in that play were blown up by the Celtics. The ball just has to find Tyrese Maxey, and that's what the design was. The execution was not. We should not be living and dying with Joel Embiid 26-foot heaves at the buzzer at this stage with all the other offensive options that they do have. Even VJ Edgecombe, who I was just speaking about, that's the guy who I trust as the decision maker at like another level. And for Grimes specifically, I do want to tip the hat that I respect the way that he's been bought back in, that he's committed to this team after a pretty bizarre offseason in which there was a lot of hurt feelings from a contract standpoint. And I'm appreciative of him being capable of putting that all to the side and just playing his role. And Grimes has been very good for this team thus far. That's a stock that I think is pointing up in the right direction as well. And to list out Grimes' stats, that he's playing 32 minutes a game so far for this Sixers team, 17.4 points, which is 4th on the team there. 4.4 rebounds, 3.6 assists, shooting 44.1% from 3. And this is kind of a crazy stat right here. Have we ever seen this level of shooting on a Sixers roster? Tyrese Maxey, 46.8% from 3. VJ Edgecombe, 43.8% from 3. Kelly Oubre Jr., 44.4% from 3. And Quentin Grimes, 44.1%. We'll see how much of that is to stay. If I'm going to make a bet on any of those, I don't think Kelly Oubre is going to be the one that sticks around. But that's a dude who's been an unsung hero for the Sixers team. The buy-in defensively, forcing turnovers, drawing charges, hitting some big shots. And when Kelly Oubre Jr. is at his best, it is just, I am more physical, I am more athletic than you. I'm putting my head down, getting in a straight line, and dunking the basketball. We've seen that at a higher rate this year. And again, he still has hit some big three-pointers, some big moments for this team. And Oubre is a guy who's sort of complementing that dirty work role that I'm talking about with Joel Embiid, that I think is necessary to pair with him, is a guy willing to get in the mud, scrap for loose balls, grab boards. Oubre does all these things at a high level, and I am appreciative that he did stick around in Philadelphia. It's a guy who gets far more criticism than I think he necessarily deserves. I've always looked at it as both these things can be true. That Kelly Oubre Jr. has played too large of a role during stretches of his time in Philadelphia, but he can be incredibly impactful when in the right role. And I think we are shaping towards him being in the right role for the season. And this is probably the best stretch of basketball that he's produced in his career. Certainly the stretch of basketball that has equated to winning at the highest rate of his career. These are not empty calories. This is not a dude scoring 20 points for the Charlotte Hornets. This is legit buy-in on both sides of the floor, and hat tip to Kelly Oubre Jr. And I love this comment too. I cannot wait to see Paul George and Jared McCain. I totally agree. And I think this is the week that we begin to see this. I also think it's kind of encouraging and like works out to the Sixers' benefit that you're able to bring the team along this way, that the foundation has been laid where you have Maxey and Edgecombe running and gunning, getting on the fast break, creating things. Grimes certainly a key part of things. Embiid beginning to scale up. And you got these other things that you can add in here. And as far as the questions for how do these all fit together, for starters, if we're just going to talk about pure opportunity, pure minutes, they just desperately need some more help. The Tyrese Maxey is leading the entire NBA at 43.2 minutes per game this season. Number 2 on that list is VJ Edgecombe at 40.2 minutes per game. And number 3 on that list is Kelly Oubre Jr. at 39 minutes per game there. Looking beyond that across the rest of the entire NBA, Alperen Sengun in 4th at 38 minutes per game. So that's 5.2 minutes fewer than Tyrese Maxey is currently logging. Then Austin Reeves, Lauri Markkanen, SGA, Mikal Bridges, Devin Booker. You get the picture there. I'm in favor of playing these guys a ton of minutes, that they have young legs that are capable of taking that type of workload, but maybe not quite that type of workload is kind of where I'm at. That we do have to keep the big picture in mind for this. And I would like to make sure that, you know, Tyrese Maxey does not look gassed by the time that the postseason is here, because guess what? Those goals are back on the table. And we are going to be talking about this team in a postseason setting. Look around the Eastern Conference. Who scares you guys? Is it the 5-0 Chicago Bulls? Is it the Orlando Magic, who look like they can't figure out who the number one option is there? That Desmond Bane is not the cure to their floor spacing and the way that it was desired? Is it the Miami Heat team that have looked good this year? The point being, things are open for the taking, and this Sixers team looks like a hungry group that is going to seize those opportunities there. So bringing McCain back into the mix, I think, is going to be a huge deal. And for McCain specifically, I even think about that play last night. If that is Jared McCain with the ball in his hand instead of Quentin Grimes, I think that play turns out a whole lot better. That there is a level of just quick twitch thinking that Jared McCain possesses as a playmaker that I feel better about. That's not quite Quentin Grimes. And for Grimes specifically, again, I don't want to like rag on him because in the overall grand scheme of things, he's been very effective and very good for this Sixers team all of last year for sure, and being back bought in this year. So I don't want to criticize the guy to a major level. I think that is more of a critique of Nick Nurse for asking him to do things that he probably shouldn't be there. If that's Maxey making that decision, I can live with it. If it's Jared McCain making that decision, I feel a little bit better about it. Even if that's Joel Embiid, or if you even want to do the Nick Nurse move and throw in a veteran and have them run that play. If we get one Kyle Lowry play, which I'm thankful he did not go that direction. But the point being here, I think in that specific spot, you need a little bit more of a guy with a floor general type instinct. That was not Grimes, and I think that's why that specific play blew up at the rate that it did. Now, to transition a little bit and run down these stock up, stock down a little bit more, let me do a little bit of a negative here. Andre Drummond, man, it's going to be an experience this year. He is so committed to being the stretch big man that we've always been hoping for. And he did hit a three-pointer last night, his first of the season. So I do have to give him props for that. But nonetheless, I just do not need to see Andre Drummond launching three-pointers pretty much ever. There's a part of me that I respect it, that it's like he's bought into playing modernized basketball. And I do think there's truth to the you got to adapt or die in the NBA, that it's a rare breed for guys like Andre Drummond to stick around. And this is a dude who went from being a max contract guy to a minimum contract guy in the span of like 5 seasons here. He's had to make changes to his game, and to give him a bit of a credit here, he does look like he's got a little bit more life in his legs than was the case last year for a certain. With that all being said, I do not understand why Dembona is not playing 100% of the minutes that we are asking of Andre Drummond. And even to look at last night's game as an example, that we saw 12 minutes from Andre Drummond, 11 from Dembona. Now, neither one of them particularly shining in the stat sheet as far as production here. Drummond with 6 points. He had 2 rebounds. Bona had 2 points. He had 3 rebounds. Pretty minimal opportunity and not things. But we did see the way that Bona can swing a game. That was the case in that 5-block game that he did overall produce there. He is one of the highest level rim protectors in this entire league when things are cooking right. And for Bona specifically, he's still raw. He's going to put the pieces together. He's going to get better as he plays more basketball. But I personally feel the only way to accelerate that growth process is to keep living with the highs and lows of it. You got to allow this guy to play through his mistakes, and I would like Nick Nurse to do that at a little bit of a higher level here. Now, to move around this roster a little bit more, mentioned Kelly Oubre as a guy that I view as the unsung hero for this team. I've been really impressed with the level that he has brought things to the table here, but do want to highlight a couple other in the lower end of this. Another negative that I'll rock with is Justin Edwards. Edwards is a guy that I spoke glowingly of, that I still see the vision for what he can be at the NBA level, but I do think maybe I've overstated it, and maybe he's over exceeded expectations at a rookie year, that we're seeing sort of the regression to the mean with Edwards specifically. I still think he's going to be a rotational player. Still think he's an NBA player, but he may not be a guy pushing to be a consistent starter at the rate that he kind of teased to be last year. Now, Nick Nurse obviously plugged him in the starting lineup for one game this season, but the production across the board has not been quite what we're hoping for Justin Edwards. As a whole, averaging just 11.6 minutes per game, 3.8 points, 1.2 rebounds, 0.4 assists, and shooting 35.7% from three. He had the red hot game in which he started out, I believe it was game 1 of the season, where he hit 3 3-pointers. Since then, has not quite looked as pretty. And Edwards seems to be trending towards, unfortunately, being a guy where it's just going to sit in the category of, if he's making shots, he's got a real part on this team. If he's not really there, that he does not stand out defensively to, require him to get minutes on the floor. He does not have an area in which he impacts the game beyond just doing the right things, making the right decisions, being a smart basketball player. So if the shots are not falling, I don't really know what a place there is. And for Edwards specifically, this also is more of a sign of the roster around him growing. Think about how great he looked as like a competent basketball player last year. There's now a lot more competent basketball players on this Sixers roster, which overall is a sign of encouragement there. Couple players to keep an eye on moving forward that I think are going to see far larger roles than has been the case so far. Trendon Watford, I want to give some love to, that I opened the season with the prediction that when push comes to shove, he will end up the starting power forward by the season's conclusion. And obviously, he started the season with a hamstring injury that has not really had a chance to fully put what he can do on display yet. But I'm really intrigued by the concept of this is a true power forward type body, a guy that is a high-level playmaker, has good instincts on the basketball court, and where my brain keeps landing on for what's the best way to maximize this Sixers team, it's about having a guy like that being capable of being the playmaker in the half court, and then all this motion around him, that it's Jared McCain running off pin downs, it's Tyrese Maxey coming off screens, VJ Edgecombe back cuts for a lob there. That's stuff that I think is going to be incredibly difficult to guard, and the Sixers have the skill set to ultimately maximize with. I think Trendon Watford is perfectly comfortable filling that role. I think Joel Embiid should be playing that role a bit more than has been the case to this point. We know that Embiid is a score-first guy and will be for the duration of his career and every part of it to this point. But he's smart enough to make the right passes. And I think his growth as a playmaker was an incredibly encouraging trend that we've seen during the Nick Nurse tenure here. I would like them to lean more into that. And I think bringing McCain back will sort of help this in itself. He is one of the highest off-ball motors in the entire league. And that's something that has not gotten enough attention and shine. That so often we talk about the Steph Curry disciples, and all that it is labeled to is these long-range shots that they want to shoot from 35 feet out, well beyond the three-point arc, pull up from half court, the Trae Young type that get compared in that. What makes Steph Curry so special as a basketball player is just the motor that he plays with, that you can't stick with that guy for a full 48 minutes. He is going to tire you out. He is going to have more in his tank than anyone else on the floor. And that is a characteristic that Jared McCain has embraced and brought into his game. Just take a game once he does come back and just watch him completely off ball. It is mesmerizing stuff and things that just fit modern basketball in a way that the Sixers should be grateful for having that as an option on their roster there. Jared McCain's going to be a real part of the Sixers team that I've stood here with the hot take on several times of that when each of these guys reach their peak as a player, I think Jared McCain's will be even higher than Tyrese Maxey. I don't feel great about that take watching how Tyrese Maxey has started the season, but that is a sign of my belief in Jared McCain. And for that specific conversation, I do think it's relevant to note Jared McCain's 20 years old, Tyrese Maxey's 25. So a little bit on different timelines, but they are a group that's going to grow together. And the thing that ties like the entire unit together, that at some point, I do think there will be a decision made that all these guards can't quite coexist and all flourish together. And I do think all signs point to Quentin Grimes being the odd man out in all of these conversations, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. The fact that VJ Edgecombe is the caliber of defender that he is makes this possible to work long-term in my mind. And not just a guy that like just digs in, has the athleticism and does it, but he's also not afraid to scale up his defensive role. He'll take on a wing. I've seen him guard Franz Wagner this year. I've seen him try his hand with Jaylen Brown, that he's not afraid of what these top-tier matchups are And I think like when we're ultimately equating what are the roles on the Sixers team, there is going to be a point probably this year that when it is who guards the opponent's best player, that VJ Edgecombe is going to wear that type of responsibility. To get that from a guy that is 20 years old, fresh out of college, has played 5 NBA games to this point is really rare, man. So shout out to VJ Edgecombe, who, by the way, has skyrocketed to the top of the Rookie of the Year ladder there. Pretty insane stuff considering this was an award this season that basically had penciled next to it Cooper Flag before the year even started. But VJ Edgecombe is making the most of his opportunity and receiving plenty of it. Again, second in the league in minutes per game. That is the level of trust that Nick Nurse is showing in him. And I think for Nick Nurse specifically, I've been a guy that's probably been more critical of most, that my biggest frustration with Nick Nurse last year, certainly you cannot blame the raw results of last year on him as a whole, that you put any coach in that specific setting. It's really hard to win, man. And there's really not a world where you can elevate that team to the level that the expectations were coming into the year, given the injury issues with Joel Embiid, what Paul George battled through, and all these kind of factors here. But what was frustrating to me about Nick Nurse directly there, it felt like he was willing to just throw his hands up and say, what do you want me to do, at a far too regular rate. That's not the version of him that we've seen this year. And for this roster specifically, it finally feels like it is fitting in to Nick Nurse basketball. That when you think about the peak of him as a coach, of the production that the teams that he coached looked like, it was all about the high-level athleticism during the time with the Toronto Raptors, switchability on defense, forcing turnovers, running in transition. And that looks a lot like what we're seeing through the early parts of this season. VJ Edgecombe is so clearly that type of player. And you even just listen to the way that Nick Nurse does talk about him, man. Speaking about, like, I tell him one thing, we watch it in film, and he applies it on the court. That is not normal for a 20-year-old. And the fact that he has received this level of opportunity totally tells the story there. You can't take VJ Edgecombe out of this starting lineup whatsoever. That I did think that there was a world where maybe we're being premature injecting him into the starting lineup as the clear backcourt partner to Tyrese Maxey. But boy, was I wrong. That dude has got it by every single definition of the way that you do slice it there. Now, to transition a little bit and move around the league, I do want to talk about each of these teams. So I mentioned the Eastern Conference being wide open for the taking. I do want to mention a couple takeaways on each of these teams. So the Chicago Bulls, off to a 5-0 start, sit at the top of the conference, the lone undefeated team in the East. That is not a team that anybody should be fearing in the long run. But I love seeing it from the Bulls. This has been an organization just completely in mediocrity for really the past decade. Since the Derrick Rose era, there did not feel to be any sort of hope for this team. And they've tried multiple variations. They've filtered through a couple different cores. They've tried to reignite it. But the organization's goal has been basically, let's sit at 500. Let's be an AC. Let's be a playing team. And we can make things work in that direction there. There is a young core being assembled in Chicago. And I think that's probably a league-wide takeaway, is how many of these youthful cores that I believe in. That you look around the league, talent is at an all-time high in the NBA. I mean, I can flip on a Charlotte Hornets game, who's going to be a team that finishes in the low end of the Eastern Conference anyway you slice it this year, and I feel good about the way that they're building. That LaMelo Ball has been brought in. Brandon Miller, a real player here. Con Knipple has been excellent. That you can talk yourself into, okay, this organization is moving in the proper direction. I think that's true across the board. So for Chicago specifically, I love that there is a little bit of momentum on their side. Matas Buzelis, give me as much stock as I could possibly buy. I think he's going to be the best player in that franchise when that they do ultimately grow to the level they're going to. Josh Giddey playing with a ton of confidence there, although the shooting issues will always be around. Kobe White's going to be returning to the floor soon. Ayo Dosunmu. I like watching the Chicago Bulls succeed right now. And it brings a little bit of a smile to my face that they're at the top of the East. Not anything that I expected through 5 games there, but shout out to them. Want to give them their credit there. Then in second, and tied for second, is our Philadelphia 76ers along with the Milwaukee Bucks. And I just got to give my full hat tip to Giannis Antetokounmpo, man. He has surpassed Tyrese Maxey as the leader in the league in points per game. And to just rattle off his full stats for the season here, Giannis is playing 32.8 minutes per game across that stretch, 36.3 points. He's adding 7 assists, 14 rebounds, shooting 57.1% from 3 and 69.5% from the field overall. That is alien level stuff. I was pretty skeptical of this Bucks team coming in the season because I just did not see the talent. That this was one of those situations where you put your finger on Giannis's face and look at the rest of the roster. It's pretty intimidating and tough to talk yourself into. This can be a team that goes places. But what we're very clearly seeing is the blueprint of you surround Giannis with shooters and good things happen, man. And that is the way that Milwaukee is playing. Giannis has been an MVP caliber player to start the year. And I do think that that is not anything that's going away anytime soon. Whether it is AJ Green knocking down buckets, you can run down the list of players on that roster that I'm kind of intrigued by. I don't love the overall talent level, but Giannis is that special of a player that you cannot count them out. And I do think that Milwaukee's building something a bit more than I gave him credit. I think the Miles Turner addition makes a ton of sense too. And you're seeing the early effects of that. Him being capable of being a shot blocker defensively while being a floor spacer on the offensive side of the ball. It's a very unique caliber of player that you do have. And Turner is one of the lone upgrades that they could have possibly had for that Brook Lopez role. Now, to continue down the standings a little bit, we have two teams tied for the 4th and 5th seed here. That would be the Miami Heat and the Detroit Pistons, each off to a 3-2 start. I've been one of the bigger Detroit Pistons fans on these airwaves that I fought the good fight. If this team has a chance against the New York Knicks in the playoffs last year, and I think they should be very proud of the turnaround that they did produce. It has not looked clean to me to start this season, but I think Cade Cunningham is still that dude. The Jaden Ivey injury thing is such a bummer, man. It feels like that dude took the leap, put it together to an extent, and then his body is just not allowing that to be the case on the floor. I fear that we could be headed for some Pistons regression, but I'm not ready to call it like that just yet. They are still 3-2 at the end of the day and can give them a little bit of love because of that. Now, the Miami Heat here, that is a team that has exceeded my expectations. They fall on the opposite side of things there. They're 3-2, and I've been impressed with those 5 games to this point. It was time for the Jimmy Butler era to end down in South Beach, down in Miami. But what is most encouraging to me is this is now a team that has entirely changed its identity. That the Jimmy Butler era, what I will think of when I think of the Miami Jimmy Butler era, is let's just sleepwalk through the regular season, and I'll go through a heater come postseason time. We're going to have a chance. And that was the story, and they had success with it. They've gone to Eastern Conference Finals. They've gone to NBA Finals with that system directly there. I can't really fault it because of the success that it did have, but I do think that there are limitations that come with that. It's nice for me to see like a Heat team that has the quote unquote Heat culture a little bit again. The Norman Powell, a real dude. Tyler Hero still got to come back and is going to be probably the best player on that team. Bam Adebayo, don't forget about him. Still doing his thing down there. Nikola Jovic, Jaime Jaquez. They have a little bit of a young core they've assembled as well. So do not count out that Miami team whatsoever. Now, to keep it rolling down, here's where we get to the middle of the pack. The 3-3 teams, that would be the Boston Celtics, the Cleveland Cavaliers, and the Atlanta Hawks here. So teams that are coming from quite different trajectories. For Boston, we know the situation, that this is a bit of a gap year for them. Jason Tatum, who knows if he steps foot on the floor this year. I am inclined to believe that if they will be in play for the playoffs, I expect to see him in a Celtics jersey this year. I know the organization is not being committal to that, and you obviously have to be cautious with Achilles tears. That's just the reality of the situation. Tatum's still in the early part of his career, even though he's incredibly accomplished and feels like he's been around for quite a bit of time. I believe the dude's 27 years old or in that range. He's got a lot of good years still ahead of him, so they're going to be careful with Jason Tatum. But if this team can keep its head above float, and I do think that that is going to be the case, I do think Tatum will be back for a playoff run and that the Celtics team should be viewed as dangerous in a postseason setting. Then the Cleveland Cavaliers are a team that had the best record in the Eastern Conference last year, a team that flamed out in the postseason once again, that for, I believe, the 3rd consecutive year, a head coach stood up there and said, I question this team's mental toughness for why that we did get bounced from a playoff. That is not a great sign to me. Now, Evan Mobley's taken another leap and does seem to be putting together. I'm a guy that's been an Evan Mobley skeptic for the larger duration of his career. I do have to tip my hat and recognize that he is pushing his games to levels that I did not really see was going to be the case. Donovan Mitchell, still that dude, and a guy that has shown up in every postseason setting, whether that is with the Utah Jazz or the Cleveland Cavaliers, that he's proven I can be the guy in a postseason setting. But he also stood up there after they were eliminated from last year's postseason, said we could go 82-0 next year, and it's not going to matter, that nobody's going to care because it's all about what happens in the postseason. The Cavaliers have fallen into that category now. I kind of believe the window is done in Cleveland. That Donovan Mitchell, still that dude. If Evan Mobley can take that leap, there is something to believe in there. But I do think the Darius Garland backcourt needs to be broken up. I do think Jared Allen, it's just not working with those 4 as your top 4. And again, there's a lot of teams that would love to trade their position to be in that. But I do think that there is a ceiling with that and not a team that I'm remotely afraid of from a postseason perspective. And then the last team in this mix, in that 3-3 mix, is the Atlanta Hawks, who are one of the darlings of the offseason. And I'm still a believer in this Hawks team. Jalen Johnson, I think when push comes to shove with this team, is going to be the best player. And I mean that directed at Trae Young specifically here. I do wonder how the feelings are behind the scene, as we saw some weirdness with the contract stuff with Trae Young. Did not sign an extension coming to this season. And this is really the year that they've built up this roster around him. That for the first time in Trae Young's entire career, he's got a variety of athletic big wings that can guard around him. The Zachary Risaches, the Jalen Johnsons, that you see the vision for what this team is supposed to be. It's on Trae Young to pull the strings and elevate to the all-NBA caliber player that he sees himself in and really should be. That if Trae Young is not in the all-NBA conversations this year, I do think Atlanta probably looks to move on and go a different direction. There just are limitations when you're built so clearly around a ball-dominant, isocentric guard the way that Trae Young plays. Now, it's another thing that, like, to compare this to Tyrese Maxey right here, the reason that I view Trae Young through a so much, I guess, more skeptical lens is because the Trae Young style of play is, let me take my time up the court, let me dribble the ball for 20 seconds of the shot clock, and then we'll live with either my deep three-pointer or creating a lob for somebody. When you watch Tyrese Maxey play, it's the opposite. It's fast-paced. It's get downhill. Let me get off the ball. Let me sprint around for a little bit, create a look without having it in my hand. That's team basketball that I think it just functions and has to be viewed differently there. But the Hawks have been subscribed to this Trae Young theology of basketball for several years now. This is the season where it does have to be put together for it. So those are the 3-3 teams, and to slide down to now 9th place in the Eastern Conference here. We got 2 teams tied with the New York Knicks and Charlotte Hornets. Now, I'll be the first one on here to speak my skepticism of this Knicks team. I love that they've dropped to 2-3. And by the way, my esteemed co-host Sam Ostry over on the Pace and Space podcast was in the building to see that loss, to see the Chicago Bulls, my Chicago Bulls, take it to them last night, which I love that being the case. The Mike Brown offense certainly looks different. That sort of in the same lens that I'm speaking about Trae Young, Jalen Brunson. And while Jalen Brunson's a better basketball player than Trae Young, you still have to live with the shortcomings that come with that. When you are leaning on a small guard to be so isocentric in that case, it does not feel like they're doing it at that same rate as has been the case since the Brunson reign in New York there. There is more team basketball, creating looks for guys like Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, Karl Anthony Towns, who continues to battle through his little quad issue there. I'm not writing the Knicks off by any means. It is a 2-3 start, and I think that should be put on display because I still hear this team talking about like they are flawless, mainly from my co-host Sam, who, you know, the Knicks can do no wrong in his eyes, seems to be the case there. But nonetheless, that team's going to be around in the Eastern Conference mix. There's no doubt about it. Now, the team tied with them, the Charlotte Hornets, I'm a guy that I want to speak the good word about. LaMelo Ball is more bought in a way that we've seen at any other point in his career. He is defending. He's getting after loose balls. He's showing an energy and a leadership that I didn't really think was in him. Now, I've been a guy that's a LaMelo Ball guy. Grew up watching the Chino Hills highlights and always rooted for Lonzo, like LaMelo, even LiAngelo. Like, I was a fan of those guys in a way. But you can't deny, like, the, I guess, lack of seriousness that he sometimes approaches basketball with. He's looked at to be the face of the organization. And I finally think that he is understanding those responsibilities. He's got other guys to lean on, like Brandon Miller, like Con Knipple here. The team is decent around him, that they have a young core, they have a direction, and I do think Charlotte is trending up. So it may not show in the raw wins and losses this season, but start believing the Charlotte Hornets a little bit. They're no longer a team that you can just chalk up as a victory when your team is facing them on an every night basis. Now, to run down the list a little bit more, the Toronto Raptors and Orlando Magic tied in 11th and 12th with a 2-4 record. Two teams that I think are filled with guys that should be the third best option on an actual contending roster. That means Paolo Banchero probably not quite in that category, but I've been pretty disappointed in him this year. The shot selection needs a ton of work here, that he's so dependent on those tough mid-range twos, which you just have to be a very special level scorer if that's going to be your shot diet. I don't think Paolo is quite that. He's an awesome player, a guy that I think is the face of the Magic pretty clearly, that I do not subscribe to the Franz Wagner propaganda that this guy's the best player on the Magic by any means. But for Paolo, there does need to be some steps in the right direction for understanding what your role is here. And I just think that there is this repetitive nature and skill sets between Paolo and Franz that unfortunately is going to result in one of them needing to play in another location. Even Desmond Bane, who's been one of the highest efficiency, highest volume three-point shooters in the league over the past several seasons, really the duration of his career, that Bane has not been the cure-all to their spacing issues the way that it's designed on paper. They still need more. And this is a team that is coming off not only being the worst three-point shooting team in the league last year, but the worst three-point shooting team in NBA basketball since 2015-16 as they surpassed the Lakers for that worst metric there. Bane has to be better. That entire team needs to buy in a little bit more to making sure that you have the proper floor spacing, allowing Franz and Paolo to get downhill. I think the Magic have some issues. It's going to take more time to clean up than a lot of us expected. It makes basketball sense on paper, but the game is not played on paper. That these guys have to actually figure out on the floor, and we're seeing the learning curve right in front of our very eye. Now, the other team tied with them, the Toronto Raptors, are a team that I also think is too repetitive in their skill sets. From RJ Barrett to Scotty Barnes, Emmanuel Quickley has been really disappointing this year. I just don't see the vision for the team whatsoever. They're good enough that they're going to be in the mix for teams and they have talent level, but they're also probably the biggest peaks and valleys of any of these teams that I've mentioned to this point. You can catch them for a nice 10-minute burst during a game where you're like, okay, this team looks really good. They're bought in defensively. They're switching. They're forcing turnovers. They're getting out in transition. And then you can catch them on another 10-minute break. And it's like, what even is this team? They don't rotate right. Offensively, it's a lot of ugly shots of guys being mid-range dependent. Like, it just doesn't look clean consistently enough for me to see the vision with it. And they're a high-spending team. They've gone kind of all in on this role-player super team to an extent here. I don't get it in Toronto. I think there are going to have to be some big picture changes here. And I think the Masai being fired this summer sort of spoke to the organization's belief. And maybe this is not trending in the right direction. I do like the coach up there. There is a high level of talent that they do have, even the likes of the Grady Dick and rotation players like that. But there's going to be some work in progress, and I don't really see it getting better this specific year. So we'll bookmark that. We'll see if Toronto can prove me wrong, but that is my feelings on that. And to round out the rest of the Eastern Conference, we have the 1-4 Wizards, the 0-5 Pacers, and the 0-5 Brooklyn Nets. Now, the Wizards are a team that, despite the 1-4 record, I feel pretty good about, to be perfectly honest, that I believe in their young talent as well, from Bub Carrington, Trey Johnson, looking really impressive out of the gates in his early start to his career here. Bilal Coulibaly, I think, is like a foundational piece. Alex Sarr looks like he's taken a leap this year and really gave the Sixers some business with the amount of production that he put on the floor. But it's going to be an ugly season in terms of wins and losses. This is going to be a team that's committed to getting that guy in the NBA draft this year, that they do want to be in the bottom feeders of the league. They do want to maximize their chance in the lottery. And that's exactly how I see things going down this year. Now, the other two teams, the two 0-5 teams, the Indiana Pacers and the Brooklyn Nets. Two other teams that very clearly want to enter that lottery mix this year. For the Nets specifically, they're coming off a season in which they spent 5 first-round picks on players, that they used every single one of them to bring in talent. I think there's questions about all these guys, and none of them have been like the sure bet that you should hope for the case with a first-round pick. The top guy, or I guess all of them, you can kind of dive into similar skill sets and similar critiques, from Ben Sarav to Nolan Traore, even the BYU dude, Igor Demon. I don't quite see the vision with, but we'll see. We'll see what it plays out. I think that they're hoping for the clear top talent of all these will be loading onto the roster next year. And with that in mind, it is going to be a competitive race for the number 1 overall pick this year. That this is not Cooper Flagg is already penciled in there for years, as was the case for last year's draft. There's going to be a competitive mix to earn that top pick, whether it is AJ DeMansta of BYU, whether it is Darren Peterson of Kansas, or Cam Boozer from Duke. Those are 3 guys that have legitimate cases for why they should be the top selection. I think any of those teams picking right near the top are going to be pretty thrilled with them. And for the Indiana Pacers, that's why I kind of think that it's okay for this to be a gap year for them. This has been a team that has exceeded expectations at a major level these past couple of years. They've been to the NBA Finals. They were 1 win away. And I'm even the guy that'll say, if Tyrese Halliburton didn't tear his Achilles, are we sure the Oklahoma City Thunder are NBA champions right now? Because my honest answer to that is I'm not sure of that. That looked to me like Tyrese Halliburton had it absolutely rolling in the early parts of the game, and the team goes as he takes them. So it is frustrating and disappointing that they're 0-5, but this is pretty much purely an injury disaster. That this happens to one team every year, and the Sixers wore that cross last year. That the weight of the world falls on them. Injuries completely derail their season, and that's what the Indiana Pacers are in the midst of right now. So Obi Toppin getting foot surgery, Andrew Nembhard banged up. There's a ton of injuries to that team that I think that's going to be the end result. If that means you take one season where you take a huge step back, can add a high-level player, and then build forward from here, that is not the worst thing in the long haul. I think the Pacers should commit to that, to be perfectly honest. That Halliburton ain't coming back anytime soon. He is still in the early parts of the recovery for that Achilles issue. I think that should be the direction for them, and I think they should feel pretty great about it moving forward. But with that all said, when mentioning those teams, so the Pacers off the mark. The Brooklyn Nets don't see them making any noise. The Washington Wizards don't see it from a wins and losses perspective. That's 3 teams right there. Then we're talking about a top 12 in the East. That is all competitive there. Can the Sixers be better than the Charlotte Hornets? I think absolutely. Can they be better than the Toronto Raptors? I think absolutely. Then we're talking about them in the top 10, which is at worst in the play-in mix. And even if you want to dive deeper into each of these teams, the Magic. Do I think the Sixers could be better than the Magic? I absolutely do. Do I think that they could be better than the Atlanta Hawks? We'll see how this all plays together and grows. The Detroit Pistons taking a step back. If Giannis gets hurt, the Bucks likely do not win a game across the entire stretch while he is out there. Things are open for the taking in the Eastern Conference, and the Sixers look like they are itching to make that type of move, that they are ready to take whatever opportunity is in front of them. I love the start to the season. Getting off to a 4-1 start was ideal for everyone. For the Sixers to have a level of buy-in, some belief internally in the locker room of, okay, we can actually do this. For the fan base getting back on track and getting back behind the Sixers team, I think is a huge deal. And just straight up propelling yourself up the Eastern Conference standings. So it is disappointing that I wasn't able to get on here and play this today. A little, but we should still be feeling pretty great about the start of the Sixers season. So still a lot more to get into, a ton of exciting stuff right off the rip this year in a way that I wasn't fully prepared to for the Sixers year. But boy, it feels great to look forward to watching Sixers basketball, to have a team that cares, that scraps, that competes, that's not going to roll over and wave that white flag. We're not going to have a moment where James Harden and Joel Embiid are just, wandering around the court as Jason Tatum's dropping 51 in the Wells Fargo Center to send this team home in Game 7. There's going to be a team that punches back regardless of how many punches are thrown their way. So I cannot wait to cover from start to finish this season right here on Pick Swap Media, right here on Fox Sports The Gambler. Got to hop off and record a couple quick things for both Sixers and Phillies Digest. So make sure you're tuned into that before I slide over to my job at DraftKings. Appreciate you guys for hanging with me for this hour right here. I'll be back here next Saturday as well, and just about every other moving forward right here on Fox Sports The Gambler and Pick Swap Media YouTube. Appreciate you guys for hanging me one more time. We're heading out to Fox Sports National right here on iHeart. Thank you guys for hanging. I'll be back talking to you next time. Plenty more to get into for the Sixers season, and cannot wait to be along for the ride. Peace.
Fox Sports Radio, The Gambler, now.